Butterfly in the sky, I can fly twice as high. Just take a look, it's in this game, Reading Rainbow. Welcome all you +2 comedy modifiers back to the stream. Welcome back to Armikrog. It's been so long since I did actual gameplay that I've just began to forget everything. But I made the promise that I would read all of this. So we got just these 3 more pillars to get through, and then we're done. So we're going to read through this as fast as possible, and that's going to be today's stream. And then we'll go back to gameplay. Won't that be fun? So let's start reading. Melville led us down the narrow canyon, where the walls stood adorned with strange carvings I could not decipher. Every angle was perfect, and the walls were smooth as glass. I realized that the canyon had not been formed naturally. The canyon walls had been carved by the dork. We came to a circle of polished white stones inlaid into the floor. Melva said that in order for us to see the dork, the stones must be stepped on in a precise pattern. Once this was done, the dork would come. Her grandfather had studied these stones, eventually discovered the pattern. The pattern had been taught to her when she was a child, sort of like a dance. She thought she was learning a kata or a family ritual. Not until much later did she realize it was the key to unlocking the dork stones. She completed the dance, and the final stone she stepped on sank into the ground 2 inches. I could hear the clinking of underground mechanisms as the stone slid against stone. Spires of minerals covering in crystals spouted out of the ground in neat rows. Black, tangled orchard of petrified trees rose against the canyon walls. All was silent. We stood waiting for 3 hours. 3 hours! Sheesh! At one point, Miva pointed behind me. I spun around to see 3 stone beings. They had a simple form, like children's drawings. The heads were huge rectangles, with coarse holes cut clear into the head, allowing the light to shine through. Their bodies were rectangular stone. Their legs and arms were slabs. 2 dork pulled a third from a white stone monolith. They pulled out the body, setting it aside. Whoa! From a white stone. Sorry, my phone just went off. The 2 dork pulled a third from a white stone monolith. They pulled out the body, setting it aside, and they pulled out an arm and hung it on the body. The process continued until the dork was completed. Do you see, Terzerk? They're giving birth. Ew! I don't want to be here for this, Mulva whispered to me. The newly formed dork was the same size as the other 2, but walked awkwardly, staggering as they guided his first steps. One of the dorks first used his finger to carve a symbol into the new dork's forehead. They will hunt for us, he said. Your name shall be Hunt. That's pretty obvious. When this was done, the dork turned to us. He welcomed Melva, and he said he knew her from long ago, when she had come to the valley with her grandfather. Melva bowed. The dork said he'd seen her as a baby and never forgot a bloodline. His name was Grell, because he grelled for them. He was the one who used the creation table and gave names. I guess that's what the word Grell means. Meva asked him if he could build a device that contained the heart of the mountain and motioned for me to show it to him. Grell looked long and hard at the purple fuzzball when I held it up to him. Then he said, we have no use for this because we cannot die. But this has been hunted for by mortals for as long as time had spun. Everyone who found it before you was either killed or banished by magicians. Does this mean I will also die? Or does it mean I was meant to have it? Neither or both. Interesting. So he's either meant to have it and will die, or he's not supposed to have it and will survive and live forever. He motioned for us to follow him to the monolith, which he called the Screeve table. Grell strived the shiny white surface of the monolith like it was liquid. It didn't move at all like solid rock. After a moment, he drew out a device which had an open hatch and two hinging arms on either side. Taking the purple fuzzball from me, he placed it in the top compartment and snapped the lid shut. Drell handed the device to me. These mechanical arms can pull the soul from one thing and hold onto it temporarily in the machine or transfer it to another object or body. Grell put the corner of the stone head on Melva's hand as if to kiss it. Visit us again, Melva. I think I've said her name differently every time. Now go in peace. Leaving Dork. We left the Valley of the Dork and continued our trek to the cottage Quiz showed us on the map. It was well off the main path, surrounded by thick woods, as much more inviting place this day than the safe house, and with no threat of turning into baby goats. The roof, remember that from earlier? The roof was tilted with bark shingles and wall were split into logs. The front door was flanked with small windows. Inside the cottage was dry and warm. There was a rocking chair, a rug made of Angora elephant, a framed bed, and a painting over a fireplace. After dumping our packs on the bed, we went outside and explored the area around the cabin. Not far off, there was a grove of wild minkmer trees. Their branches hung low from the weight of the fruit on them. I plucked one, and we shared it, the sugary juice running down our chins. Gross. To the south, a stream trickled down from nearby mountain peaks, run off from the thawing snow many miles above us. I've looked back on this time in the cabin and longed to return to those memories. It was the best time of our life. It should be our lives, right? We were free from worry and concern, and our love continued to deepen. I can only think of one moment when it all went stink bad. The baby gardens. Miva went outside in the cool of the morning and paced off a large square field. Then a second field in the shape of a giant circle. The square field was for boys and the circular was for girls. By our custom, it was mandatory to build both fields and to decide which field would house the seeds only after both was complete. Some couples demanded only males, some demanded only females, some demanded the exact same amount of each sex. Some decided to plant all their offspring in one season, while others chose not to plant any seed at all. We had walked around the two fields, Milva gleaning every weed from the area so that it looked pristine. All rocks and pebbles were moved to the outskirts of the fields, making an accidental sweeping rock path around them. She set up a border markings of sticks and then drew a string taut between them. We gathered small sticks and placed them along the sterling border. She sang a song about the family inside the border and how one day they would meet the family outside the border. The land was rich for reproduction. It came time to plant. I exhaled a small sack. What? I exhaled and a small sack lowered from the bottom of my torso. Where I am from, the sacks have 3 black marks on them. 2 of them look like circles for eyes, and one mark below like a smile. Inside the sack contains any number of seeds from 1 to 99. We are forbidden from checking the count of seeds in the sack, so the day of planting is always a surprise. The next part of the planting ritual is up to Miva. She pokes her finger through the right eye mark of the sack, and the line that looks like a mouth opens up and says "Yar," like a pirate. Then the number of seeds we are to plant that day come out of the mouth. In our case, 1 seed came out and landed in Miva's open hand. Next, she was to choose which field would receive the seed. Would it be the square field or the circular field? But before she could make her choice, something terrible happened. The seed withered in her hand and blew apart in a puff of smoke. He's impotent. Shock came over Miva's face as she considered the seed's obliteration in her hand. She looked up at me to see how I would respond. I was not sure how to act. I don't know what the hell's going on, so I don't blame you. The first thing that came to mind was that people would call her from now on Obliterator. I pushed that word out of my mind because obliterator. No, not Miva. She would not be known as an obliterator. It is true that other obliterators who did not want to be known by that name often claimed that they never tried to have children in the first place, but was hard to do for the couples who more publicly built their square and circle fields in thickly populated areas. Sometimes the husband took the blame, claiming that no seeds was ever produced from the sack in the first place. He would be known as seedless. That is a name so shameful that we would shout that curse to our enemies on the other side of the battlefield. Seedless, seedless, seedless. Miva wept in my arms and said I could leave her and find another female. I was gone. I told her that I would rather be married to even an obliterator than any non-Miva female. She had the desperate idea to use the soul transfer device to put her into the field of a viable female. What? To put her in the body of a viable female. The idea was wrought with difficulties. The first would be to find a female who wanted to be pulled from her body into Miva's. Why would a female want to be removed from her own body? Perhaps if she had an incurable disease. If she was going to die anyway, she would want to switch bodies with Miva. Then Miva could bring us a baby, and we could figure out something else to do with her incurable disease. Perhaps I could build her a mechanical body in which to house her soul in case of emergencies? What is happening? Miva was willing to do this. Why? Why? Like, you're convicts. Like, don't bring children into this. But I did not like the idea of using the soul transfer machine. Good. It was for emergencies. I'm going to move my chair. There we go. Now I'm more in frame. It was for emergencies, and it needed much more experimentation before we knew the limits of its power. I was not sure how trustworthy the housing device we got from the rock people would be. It dawns on me now that my character in this actually has a baby, who I am going to guess it's going to end up being this baby. Or this is a lot to read for no reason. What happens if the device failed? What would happen if the device killed the purple fuzzball in the middle of the soul transfer? I assumed the body would be obliterated. The soul could be cast into the air, a homeless ghost in search of a body. No, experimenting on Miva would not do. She was already sad enough by not being able to bring us children. We did not turn the two fields under, but we did keep nature from claiming the ground for the forest again. Trees grew in those fields, male trees weathered square and female trees in the circle fields we used. Funny. Rocks tumbled back over the ground, male rocks in the square used to be, and female rocks in the circle. The weeds came. Weeds don't have gender. Miva and I never brought up what happened in those two fields again. Artism. 5 years passed. I hate how it keeps getting darker. 5 years passed, and 5 years passed. Five years passed. That's what it says. Okay. And we thoroughly researched the soul transfer device. I took most of the notes, and Miva formally put everything into her secret journal. We concluded our experiments, having grown weary of research, and put the soul transfer device in storage under the bed. With the diversion of research over, I noticed Miva spent long hours staring out the window. She was looking at the baby gardens, now visible under the thick patches of weeds. One day, Miva went outside to draw shapes in the soil using sticks. She told me it was a new art theory. Yeah, sure it was. She was working on called Draw Shapeism. Clever. Then she pushed the sticks into the ground and called it Stickism. Not to be outdone, I piled rocks in front of our cabin and called it Roxism, because I'm an idiot. Soon her stick artworks began to fill the yard, leaving little room for my rock expressions, which, with no place left on our property to properly display my art, I decided to pioneer a new undiscovered genre of fine art. I plucked pine cones from the surrounding trees and rehung them on branches. I called it pineconism. Miva thought I was mocking her art, which, honestly, you are. I asked her why she didn't think I was just mocking rockism. She claimed intuition. She said that pineconism was redundant and derivative, which infuriated me. I cared nothing more than about pineconism. What the heck happened to these people? Like, they were outlaws with, like, this super powerful thing, and then for 5 years they just grew to hate each other in the woods. Out of spite, I tied the pine cones onto the exact place where I had plucked them, inciting more criticism from Miva. She said she couldn't tell if the pine cones were growing naturally from the tree or if I had plucked them and tried them back onto the branch. I faked offense and yelled, "You do not have an eye for art, or you recognize pineconism if you saw it." Is this a real argument? Or is this just like a couple being cute? She declared a new form of pineconism, where the artist did not pluck the pine cone from the branch and retie it before declaring it as a work of art. I thought this was obviously silly and said as much. She yelled, "You were just jealous of my superior form of expression, Tzurk. You know that I've discovered an authentic movement known as pineconism." "You are not even making art, Miva," I yelled. "What you're doing is called nature, not art. This is a real argument that I'm reading." She glared at me. That is what all stupid people say about great art when it was first discovered. They did not have the mind to understand such things. I am shocked to know that you're one of those people. I pointed to the ground. Fine. I just discovered groundism. It's when the ground is just like the ground. In fact, the whole world is already my work of art, because it is covered with the ground. I will sign my name to the world. I snapped the stick from the ground and signed my name on the ground. Miva's face turned red with anger. "You just broke one of my stickiest artworks." "Well, there weren't," again, no apostrophe, "any other sticks I could use to sign my name," I shouted back. "Someone picked them all and stuck them into the ground." That night, Miva moved out of our bed and set up a pile of clothing to sleep in the corner. I saw the stupidity of our fight and said so, but she would not talk to me and would not return to our bed. That night, I did not sleep. When we slept together, I rested my hand on her hip. The empty space she left in the bed was haunting. I kept looking over at Miva in the corner and could not believe I acted so stupid to her. I realized that she was really trying to be an artist. She needed to create. Like life, you know. She hadn't started stickism to spite me. She was expressing herself. I was a fraud. I was the one acting in spite. The lone bed was a warning that if I continued to disrespect my treasured wife, I may just end up alone forever. The next morning, I saw her stirring, so I went down to lay beside her. I apologized to her and admitted my spite. She held up her hand to quiet me. "I curse my love of art. I put it before you. I forgive you, but I don't want to pursue stickism or my fraudulent form of pineconism anymore." She took my hand and placed it on her hip. She said, "I have a new art form. I will call it Turkism, and I will only be a Turkist. A Tzurkist. And I am Mivaist. I will only be obsessed with Mivaism forever." Back to research. I threw myself onto the study of the soul transfer machine. Miva documented everything. Secret journal. You know, I'm guessing there's stuff behind my head. In a secret journal. Undisclosed location. Trust me, don't even bother trying. When I first turned the machine on, we could feel it drawing power from the surrounding environment. It was used. If we used it too often, the surrounding trees would droop from exhaustion and the grass would lose its color. Though we didn't feel anything, it was my suspicion that the soul transfer machine would be drawing its power from Miva and I. With the use of some handmade baskets and some string, I was able to trap small spurs on which to experiment. Cool. We always had a few cages along the back wall of our cabin and took them outside when weather permitted. The first specimen I caught was an adult spurred that looked healthy. I called him Specimen A because I'm great with names. I put him in one of the transfer machine's claws and had the other claw touching a rock. This was to accumulate my first experiment in the blank mines when I touched the purple fuzzball and went into the mountain. I pushed a button on the device and began to hum. Then I flipped the switch. Specimen A went suddenly limp, and the soul transfer machine cut its own power. Miva pushed her fingers through the specimen's feathers, feeling for a pulse, but there was none to be found. We inspected the rock. I picked it up and held it up to my face. It was cooler than the room temperature, but there was no visible sign that anything different. If you're in there, little Spurd, hold on tight. We'll bring you back to your body, I said. The claw of the machine was once again attached to the rock. The claw of Specimen A remained, and we turned the machine on, flipped the switch, and the spire sprang back to life. Its head snapped up, and its feet clenched. We kept Specimen A in the cage long enough to make sure there was no lasting side effects. Later that spring, we set Specimen A loose, and he built a nest in a tree that grew from what used to be the circular field. It was not exactly clear. It wasn't clear exactly, if you want to read it non-dyslexically, what happened in the event of the soul transfer. We were not sure if the soul got extracted from the body, and that caused the heart to stop, or if the soul transfer machine stopped the body's heart, which released the soul to the transferred. To be transferred. Excuse me. All right, how are we doing on time? We're here. We're reading. It's bright again. Isn't that great? Beav and I spent weeks trying to come up with an experiment that would give us a clear result to our hypothesis. Many of the experiments we conducted, most of them mundane. I will not bore you with the details. Cool. But I will bore you with the results. Less cool. We found that most living bodies could go without a soul for some amount of time. It may only be a few seconds, but none of the bodies could survive without a soul for longer than 2 minutes under normal room conditions. You killed a lot of Spurds. We tried a soul transfer in the winter on a hibernating hamster, and his body survived after 4 minutes without a soul. But most did not survive that long of an ordeal. There were problems with the bodies we were using in that the stopped heart removed the ability to deliver oxygen to the subject's brain. So some soul transfers were successful, but the brain damage of the body was often so great that the Spurd was incapable of flight, so had no memory or died sometime later. We hated being the cause of those Spurds' death, so we tried to return the souls to their bodies within 2 minutes. Specimen X is Deadpool. Was lost when we unhooked the claw from the Spurd's body midway through the transfer. The body went transparent, then completely vanished. It was unclear what happened to the Spirit's soul, but we could hear it chirping in the air around us, even after the body was disposed. This was strange, since Spur's souls was not attached to the body's vocal cords, and yet both Meva and I could hear it. Specimen X chirping went more and more distant before it went silent, never to be heard again. It was unclear to us if the body was disintegrated by choice of the purple fuzzball or because of the disconnected of the soul transfer machine. That brings us to Specimen Y. The disintegration of Specimen Y. During the soul transfer of Specimen Y, I prodded the purple fuzzball with a stick, and every time the room came to a stop. The lamp in the room remained lit, but it went dim for a moment. I experienced that what Specimen Y was feeling, and at that time I could feel his body splitting from his soul. I felt my heart beating in my chest, then saw my body from Specimen Y's point of view. I felt terrified. My body looked like a giant poking a purple fuzzball with a stick standing across from little Spurd's body. The room went bright white, and I was slammed back into my Tizurk body. Miva and I were flung across the room, our bodies pressed against the wall by an unseen force. When the room went back to normal, Specimen Y's body was gone, as was the rock his soul was supposed to be cast into. The stick in my hand, but was in my hand, but it made chirping sounds. Uh-oh. The stick chirped for several days, but faded as the days went on, until the voice died entirely. The visit. All right. We were eating breakfast when the cabin was shaken. It stopped. An intermediate hum came from the backyard. We rushed to find a spaceship covered in stars floating just above the ground. It was the size of our cabin. We walked around it. I put my hand on the hull. It was cool to the touch. The ship moved even under the slightest pressure, like my hand. Pressure on my hand like a balloon. Okay. I wonder if there's a door, I said. Just then, as if by coincidence, the edge of the door appeared. Then it disappeared. Miva saw it too. We tried to find the edge of the door with our fingers, but it remained smooth aside from the two gashes left where the door was. I wonder if someone's inside. Again, the edge of the door opened only slightly, but enough to allow the sound to escape from the ship's interior. Wah! A cry came from inside. It was Waluigi. Not the cry of something big, but something small. That sounded like a child, Miva gasped. We have to get it. Isn't this how I found the child? Wasn't it in a crashed spaceship? As if moved by her demand, the hatch opened wide, a small set of stairs expanding to the ground. The cry came louder now that the hatch was open. We couldn't see inside because the white lights flooded from inside. Miva was halfway up the stairs before I grabbed her arm. Miva, we don't know if it's safe. Wah! Came the baby cry again. There was fire in Miva's eyes. Someone needs us. We'll find out if it's safe later. She pulled me up into the bright light. I stumbled onto the steps, and then we were inside. Miva tripped over something beyond the door, and she gasped. We stood there for a moment, waiting for our eyes to adjust to the light. From inside the craft, it was hard to make out any sound beyond the hum of the engines and the crying. Finally, through squinted eyes, I'm sorry, my nose itches, we saw what Miva had tripped over. Two beings lied on the floor, together, arm in arm. I would have thought they were asleep, but their faces were gaunt, and their skin was stretched along the shape of their skulls. Eyeballs dried and sunk in. Miva covered her face. I knew what had killed them. I had seen it before in the mines. When a miner was being punished for something particularly terrible, he would have his rations taken away. These were the effects of starvation. Again the crying. And again my nose itched. This time Eva stepped over the corpses and went in search of the source. What if it's a trap? The cry could be a universal distress signal to attract victims. Maybe this is not a ship. Maybe it's a living entity that hopes to kill and eat us. You have a great imagination, Tizurk, Miva called over her shoulder. I followed. My nose is the itchiest. We passed a small room that caught my attention. Wires traced their way around the ceilings, walls, and floors. They came together at a power grid covered in little crystals inserted into the gaps. The crystals were dull greenish color. In a chamber, Miva found a baby in a padded pod, chained to a console. The room was filled with the stench of feces. Ew. When Miva lifted the child from the bed, it was easy to see that the smell was coming from the overflowing diaper. Ew! Even its pod was smeared with it. Too much detail, dude. Tizurk, quickly, give me your robe, Miva said. Miva removed the dirty wrapping and tossed them back into the pod. Taking my robe, she gently wrapped the child. Though sullen, the child seemed comforted by its newfound freedom from the soggy diaper. Her cries spurted to a stop. Miva rocked the girl in his arms, singing softly. The baby watched her with wide eyes. The little thing spoke. Pee! She burped. A green bubble. I popped the bubble, and a small crystal fell out from it. Weird, landing on the floor. It looked just like the crystals I had seen inserted into the grid, except this one was a bright green. The baby nuzzled her head into Miva's arms, her eyes closed in exhaustion. Miva looked around the room. She hasn't been changed her for days. She hasn't been changed her for days. Again, no apostrophe, but still, she hasn't been changed her for days. It's a video game. You can patch these things. Just saying. I might be the first person to have ever read all of this. Miva observed. It didn't make sense that the two beings on the stairs starved to death while the child seemed to be so well fed. I turned the crystal over in my hand, trying to understand. Then it came to me. They starved themselves to feed the child, I said. The crystals coming from her. They power the ship. She was their only chance for survival. After they died, the ship ran out of power and drifted into our backyard. Miva smiled. She found us. To Zerk. Oh. Missing quotation mark, I think. Miva smiled. She found us, Zerk. We could not... She found us. You did see where the ship landed, right? I shook my head. On the female baby garden. She will be our child. I saw the look of renewed hope in Miva's eyes. Though I doubted any cosmic will was bent on bringing this female child, I did not want to hurt Miva's feelings. No apostrophe. There's an apostrophe here. You have that key? Whatever the cause of this coincidence, it was a good thing that for Miva's heart to have a child in her arms, a child that needed her. We took P off the ship and brought her into the house. That night she slept between us and we could hear her breathing. I put my hand on Miva's hip and she put her hand on the baby's back. Just before we drifted into a deep and peaceful sleep, I heard Miva say, "You're safe now, P. I love you." A giggle, a burp, pop, a crystal clattered on the floor. The signal. There were several mornings that Miva dreamt the same thing. She saw P being born in the center of a planet, hundreds of thousands of years ago. The dream was strange enough, but its reoccurrence was troubling. Another oddity was P's diet. It was non-existent. Again and again, Miva tried to get P to eat something, but she would just laugh until she burped up a green bubble. In the middle of the cabin lay a burlap sack full of green crystals. She's not eating, Zerk, and she doesn't even seem hungry, Miva said. It was quite the puzzle. We had both seen her waste inside the ship, so she had to eat something, or at least she'd be capable of it. Miva held P close, and the little green baby smiled. Green baby. And wrinkled her nose, and burped up a huge green bubble formed in the air. Popped it, revealed a slightly larger green crystal, about the size of an egg. I picked it up and the crystal examined it. It reminded me of something we had found once in the mind. We found a crystal similar in shape and size, but it was blue. After discovering it, Jackson Rexon, remember him, was notably excited. He ripped it from my hands and examined it in the light of one of our headlamps. He said it was Catonium? Sure. He said something about selling it and buying a new house. He slipped it in his pocket and we never saw it again. Could these little green crystals be similar? That evening, we were sitting on the front porch enjoying the cool mountain air. Miva was teasing P with a little straw doll that she had made, and P was giggling as usual. I examined the crystal. There was a low hum, not from the crystal, but from beyond the trees. From the valley road. What I saw was like a boot to, What I saw was like a boot to the stomach. 3 military hover pods stopped on the road. Scores of soldiers poured from them and disappeared into the trees. How did they find us? Miva cried. It's been over 5 years. I looked down at the green crystal in my hand. P was emitting a source of power that would have shown up on the radar of every military vehicle across the country. How could I be so stupid? They were not coming for us. They were coming for her. I ran back into the cabin. I dug out a sock with the abominate's finger. Oh no. Even if I managed to kill some soldiers, I would never stop all of them. Escape was our only option. Quick, Miva, to the ship! We ran out the back door just as the soldiers reached the cabin. Open the hatch, I yelled at the ship, and it obeyed. Miva scrambled with P, but... nah. Then I remembered something. The soul transfer device was still in the cabin. I nodded to send Miva into the ship and ran back into the cabin. Close the hatch, I yelled over my shoulder, and the ship obeyed. Inside the cabin, the front door groaned against the rusty hinges, and the soldiers pounded the other side. I saw shadows pass by the windows. They were going around back. I fell into my belly in front of the bed and pulled the device out. It was nearly back outside when the front door gave in, bursting inwards. Dart bits from the doorframe around me, and I slammed the back door closed on them. Soldiers came around from both sides of the cabin. Open! I screamed at the ship as darts pinged off the door frames. I dove inside the stairs before the stairs even had time to extend. I shouted for the hatch to close, and not a moment too soon, boom! A concussion bomb made the ship reel. Miva was thrown against the wall, her arms shielding P. I held up the device for her to see, and she nodded. Another concussion hit the ship, throwing me to the floor. They're shelling us, she yelled. We ran into the control room together, but none of the controls made any sense. Miva was in despair. How do we take off? I suddenly remember the green crystal in my pocket. It was bright green, like the sun casting through a new spring leaf. Power. The ship needed power. I raced down the hall into a room with grids. I tore out the dull green crystal and threw it inside. I inserted the new bright crystal in its place. A voice from overhead said, "Petroleum accepted." Because there's P. That's fun. 2%, 12% charge. Instantly, the ship turned on an unseen pivot and shot upwards, pressing us into the floor. The whole room rumbled. We shook as we gained speed. From where I laid on the floor, I could see Miva, but I could not get up to be with her. She was pinned to the wall, clutching P in her arms, straining against the pressure. She tried to hide the fear on her face. All went silent. We pierced the atmosphere. Oh no. The resistance was gone. The vacuum of space enveloped us. Miva and I scrambled into the control room. The knobs, levers, and buttons were completely cipher. Does any of this look familiar to you? Said Miva. I'm a miner, Miva, not an astronaut. I think that's a Star Trek reference. Don't worry, Tizerk, Miva said. We're a family now. I would rather be here with you and P than back in my father's palace. Hurling through space, I can say that in this moment, I am complete. I laughed and my heart grew stronger. I said, "You are Armikrog." Title drop. This is probably important. That is what I shall call you from now on. Miva's face contorted. That's a horrible sounding word. What does it mean? A wrinkled man on the Watati Desert tribe was sold into slavery and worked with our mining crew. Whenever his hammer fell on the walls that were too hard to chip, he would shout, "Armikrog," at the rock. That's you. The immovable rock. Miva shook her head and laughed. Never call me that ugly name. Okay, I said and mumbled under my breath. Armikrog. I heard that. There is one more chapter left, and I'm just about out of time. So we are going to save the final chapter of this story that has the title drop in it for next time. And then we're going to get back into gameplay. So I hope you're enjoying this series where I read. On YouTube, I'm not going to cut these up. I'm just going to put all these long-ass videos up, and you can listen to me read and hear my voice go. But thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Starting next episode, we'll get back into gameplay. But actually, if you're watching this on YouTube, the next episode will probably be reading, and then the episode after that will be gameplay. But if you're joining me here on Twitch, you get both. So that's why you should follow me here on Twitch. That's +2 Comedy. I stream every weekday, so be here. It's fun. It's at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Or just subscribe to +2 Comedy Gaming, and you can catch up on all these streams. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you when? How about next time? boop.